And we continue at 1:05 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Coachella Valley. And Randy Wang's in Culver City.
Will writes in at johnnydontlikeshow@gmail.com and says, the Oakland cigarette thieves take public service announcements to a whole new level. There literally is no safe cigarette. These poor store clerks would be safer applying for a job in Yemen.
I think if we fact-check that statement, it would be true.
I said, hell no, baby boy. Let me get up on out of here. It's wild, wild west out here.
It's a lot of crime now.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the founder of Neighbors Together Oakland and was the leading voice in the Recall Shangtao movement. You can get him online at recallshangtao.org and follow him on X at Seneca Speaks 21. Seneca Scott, welcome.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be back. And my prayers and blessings to everybody in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for stopping by today. There's a lot to get to with you today. Let's first start out with the news that in Oakland, Shangtao, we know, of course, has been recalled from office, thanks in part to your diligent work in that effort to kick her out of office. And now the seat is open. Now there's going to be an election where Oakland residents, Oakland voters, will have a chance to select a new mayor. One longtime Oakland politician, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, has announced that she is in fact running for mayor. She recently did a sit-down with KTVU TV in the Bay Area. Here is Barbara Lee on why she's running for mayor.
Congresswoman, thanks so much for the time. 26 years in the House, decades in public service. I know you've talked to a lot of people about this decision, but why run for Oakland mayor now?
Why run for Oakland mayor now? After talking with many, many people from all sectors, I decided that I love this city enough to really give it a try with everyone, because what I...
Give it a try?
The old college try.
It reminds me of run.
Because what I learned also is that people want to be unified here. They want a city that's going to move forward, and they recognize the challenges, as I do after all of the meetings that I've had. And I'm hands-on, and I think that we can rise to the occasion, but it's going to take a heck of a lot, and it's going to take all of us to do this. And so I'm excited.
Does she have anything to offer besides a bucket full of cliches?
That's what Rob Bonta usually offers.
Well, come together seems to be the new thing now, that progressives are being exposed for their failed policies. But, because we're very likely to have her as our mayor, and if you're a person who lives in Oakland and you're rooting for Oakland's success, you don't want to root for the failure of what appears to be our next likely mayor, unless somebody comes out of the woodworks with some fire in their belly, and it won't be me. I'm not running. So let's just... a challenger that presents itself soon, former Congresswoman Barbara Lee will be the next mayor of Oakland. And so I am hoping that she means what she says about bringing people together. I have two questions I would like for her to answer, or the main one really, but two questions. She told us that the recall was anti-democratic and implored people to keep Mayor Shangtao. So first question is, what do you say to the 86,535 people who voted to recall her? Because we didn't listen to your advice. And she may be arrested any day by the FBI. Second question, over 70% of the Black community voted to recall Shangtao. So what do you say to the Black community, particularly who faces the brunt of the results of failed policies from progressives, from defunding the police, and basically letting RVs park everywhere and illegal dumping happen, and our stores, as you just mentioned, those cigarettes, with thousands of cigarettes being stolen in the latest heist. This is a nightly occurrence that 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 businesses are being stolen. And so I am hoping that she means what she says about bringing people together. are being hit in coordinated fashion, and we're losing all of our revenue in our business sector. What do you say to the people who voted for that recall and why? And why you told us not to listen to you? That's a big question for me.
One of the things that is required to be a mayor, particularly in a big city, is a certain skill set. And there are certain skill sets that work out if you're in a legislature, and she's a longtime member of Congress, before that, the state legislature. But generally speaking, just because you've been able to exist in a legislature and been successful at being reelected cycle after cycle doesn't mean you'll experience success as mayor of a big city or as governor. We've seen this
not
happen.
At all. We know that.
Well, we've seen it time and time again. I mean, here in Los Angeles, Karen Bass was in Congress for a long time, and now the response that we're seeing to these fires is pathetic, to say the least. We saw in the state of Alaska, Frank Murkowski was a longtime U.S. senator there, came home to Alaska to serve as governor of that state. He was scandal-plagued from the moment he put his hand on the Bible. That was crash and burn. And then in Oakland, you guys have done this before, with a longtime member of Congress, when Ron Dellums moved over from the congressional seat to become mayor. In fact, Barbara Lee was asked about that by KTVU. Let's hear about it.
Congressman, when you think about the arc of your career, starting in the office of Ron Dellums, how much do you think about him during this process, knowing that this is a very similar path that he took?
Well, I think about Ron a lot, not only now, but historically. I mean, he was a coalition builder. He brought people together. Ron served in Congress and did a great job. He came home as mayor. And so he was a federal official. I'm a federal official. I'm a hands-on person. I know how to get the job done. I have a business background as well as a master's in social work. And so I think of Ron. I think of my mother, my father. I think of Shirley Chisholm. I think of Supervisor John George, who encouraged me to run for the California Assembly from day one. And so there are a lot of people I think about, including Ron.
For people who were not happy with what Mayor Dellums did when he was in office and perhaps see similar lines, what do you tell them about perhaps the different kind of candidate or the different kind of mayor that you would be?
Well, I would tell them to look at my history, Barbara Lee history, what I've delivered for Oakland, how I view the city and how I view our county and our state.
City's going great, right?
What do you make of that answer?
Here's what I have to say to that. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Tell me how. Don't tell me what. Tell us how. Oakland's facing a fiscal crisis. We don't have a balanced budget. We somehow found some change in the sofa to keep us going for a few more months. Don't tell us what you're going to do. Bringing people together or empty platitudes has nothing to do with displaying the financial acumen or municipal finance experience necessary. And so she points to a business background. Maybe that's promising. But here's the thing, as we know. Oakland's structure, if you don't know, is very unique. And the real thing is our city council is still dominated by progressives. SEIU 10-1 still has a heavy influence on this city. They're going into negotiations this year. A big point of contention on our budget is whether that they should take a haircut or not, which they should, because they're paid 2.5 times more than most employees in the state of California. They're even paid more than employees in the city of San Francisco that has a higher cost of living. Also, we have the issues of our pension. The PEPFAR reform of 2013, most people don't talk about this, but what unions did, and I know because I personally negotiated these contracts as the then union leader, is that we should force the burden onto our individual bargaining unit. And so the whole point of that reform was to set us on a different pension course so we didn't, collapse it without money. And the union said, well, we don't care. We're going to make the local municipalities basically pay that difference. So there was no pension reform in California in these cities that SEIU runs. And as a consequence, Oakland taxpayers like myself are pension cows that get milked to pay these exorbitant pensions that are not sustainable. So until we actually can talk about the elephant in the room and do so in a way that doesn't cut police and fire at a time when businesses are exiting Oakland at a rapid rate or failing out of Oakland, and there's no new businesses coming here, and we have no new anchor businesses coming here. The price of real estate is collapsing, which affects the real estate transfer tax. I mean, I could go on and on because I actually do have a high level of municipal finance acumen. That's why I ran for mayor, because I was ready to lead the city. But I need to hear that from her. Don't tell me what. Tell me how. Tell me that you actually have a command of Oakland financial problems and that you can chart a course to not going bankrupt. Because if you look at Vallejo and Stockton and San Bernardino, if your city goes bankrupt, you lose your medical retiree benefits, and you're going to see an exodus of police officers. And then you're going to have even less public safety, and we're going to be stuck like the West Coast Detroit. So tell me how you're going to stop this. Not you're going to bring people together and look at my history or whatever the heck she was talking about. Maybe she does have a plan. Maybe she has someone that she's going to bring in who can help us out. I really hope so. I'm praying so because she's probably going to win. And again, I don't want her to fail, but I'm just really concerned right now.
To that point, she was asked what she would do about crime in Oakland. Here's what she had to say, cut 15.
As a former small business owner, what do you tell business owners that we talk to regularly who say, we're so frustrated we can't make it work out here because of the crime, because of taxes, etc.? What do you say to business owners to keep them in Oakland?
Well, I say let's try doing this a different way because business owners deserve to be safe like residents do. Downtown deserves to have businesses flourish. Employees and people in downtown want to be able to go to restaurants, want to be able to shop downtown. And so we have to figure that out. We want to make sure that businesses don't have to worry about being broken in. I'm not a defund the police candidate. And so I believe...
Why'd she laugh when she said that?
I don't know.
And so I believe in violence prevention, crime prevention.
She wants to invest more in the life coaches for gang members.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so basically, she says I'm not a defund the police candidate, and the first words out of her mouth are violence prevention, which is a code name for things that took money away from police, Department of Violence Prevention. This is very concerning. She said try it a different way. What different way? Don't tell me how. What? I mean, what? I'm sorry, I'm mixing myself up. Don't tell me what, tell me how. What different way? Right? What different is she willing to do to invest in public safety? Here's another big one. Bring Oakland workers back to work. SEIU union members and Local 21 union members are at home. They're teleworking for the most part, elected public work, and they have to show up. Bring them back to work. Downtown's empty. Let's get Oakland back to work. If you go to the companies down there in the private sector, they're not working in downtown either. Ask them to come back to work and use her gravitas and her popularity as extremely popular congresswoman to implore everyone in Oakland to get back to work. And one more thing that I want to mention on air, so I have it on record, especially in light of these fires, Oakland's staff, city staff, has a double duty for disaster preparedness. And there's an extensive document, 270-page document to be exact, where it goes over the administrative tasks and how the Oakland city workers have double duty in case of an emergency or fire or earthquake. And they can't perform those tasks if they're not at work. And they may be out of alignment with state regulation. I haven't done extensive research on the legality of it yet, but nevertheless, they're not prepared to perform those services if they're sitting at home. And so, I mean, we need to get Oakland back to work. We need to have firm commitment to things that she's going to do. And I'm not hearing any of that. I'm hearing more word salads and platitudes, and I'm very concerned for Oakland.
Well, here's something else. I don't see how she's any different policy-wise from Sheng Tao. She certainly doesn't have the personal baggage of having the FBI breathing down her neck, and she's more well-spoken than Sheng Tao, who sounded like she was not ready for prime time from the moment she took over. Barbara Lee is a professional politician and can give more polished answers, but I don't see how she's any different on any subject that matters.
Well, I can tell you how she's different from inside baseball. And so she is right. She's talked to a lot of people. She talked to people that Sheng Tao would not talk to because she's a spiteful, hateful person who wasn't a good leader. And she has displayed at least that she's willing to meet and hear people out from a variety of backgrounds. And that there is some promise in that. So I think that she's a better statesman or stateswoman because of her experience in Washington, D.C. And when you meet with her, she's a lot more present and thoughtful. And so I don't, if she is willing to actually listen and make balanced decisions and tell the union things they don't want to hear and just not be a mother puppet for the unions and progressive policies, and she can do that because she has the power to do that. She doesn't have to follow along with that program. It would be a change of heart. I hope she hears this. It would mean a change of heart than her current trajectory, which, to your point, does look like she's just going to do the same thing Shinkawa did.
If elected, she would be a mayor of a big city with a lot of problems in her 80s. If she were to be reelected, she would be a mayor in her mid to late 80s. We're a state that had Dianne Feinstein as our senator, who died in office at, I believe, 89 years of age. Nancy Pelosi is still in Congress. She's 84 and will be 86 by the time this term ends. She's opened up an account to run for re-election, which means she, if successful, would be there until the age of 88. And then I guess she could run for re-election after that if she wants to. That question was brought up to Barbara Lee. Here is what she had to say, cut 14.
As you know, this is a crowded field so far, and it continues to grow. When you hear people say that Oakland needs a new generation of leader or a fresh outlook to lead this city, how do you respond to that?
I respond, one, Oakland also needs experience. It needs someone who can bring people together and who knows where the levers of power and funding are. I have that experience as being an appropriator and on the budget committee in Washington, D.C. for decades, but also recognizing that the federal government may or may not be there given Donald Trump. So we have to know and be prepared for this administration also in terms of resisting some of the terrible things that could take place. I'm very experienced. I understand it. I understand state government. I understand the private sector, former small business owner. I've had to meet a payroll. And I know the federal government very well. And I believe that everyone has a right to run. First of all, I truly believe that in a democracy, and they can say what they'd like to say. They have to put their record out, what they have done. I've delivered billions and billions of dollars to Oakland. And
where'd that money go?
What do you make of that answer?
That was actually one of her better answers in that interview. So I would say that she doesn't sound old. She sounds quick and on her feet with the answer. It was definitely a word salad with more come together, and I have the experience. It was, again, nothing of power. Who's she coming with? Who's the city administrator? Right? Can we get a name? Right? Who's the name of the city administrator you're going to have if you win? So we can vet that person. I think that would be a lot more compelling information for the voter. But I don't know what to make of it past that. I just don't hear anything of substance. But I do think that in terms of her being able to find money and work with maybe Gavin Newsom or other people, yeah, I hope so. She's probably going to win. I hope she can find money for us because we're broke. We're going to need it.
As someone who lived through a city government that did not function under Mayor Sheng Tao, I'm sure you're watching the same images we're watching down here as we deal with the fires, where the government sent erroneous text messages to everyone in the county saying you're being evacuated because you're in a dangerous area. And it turned out to be a tech glitch, and they just kept sending those text messages over and over and over again, including in the middle of the night. There was apparently no water or not enough water in the Palisades to fight the fire. The reservoir in that area was empty. It was down for maintenance, but the Department of Water and Power never told the fire department. Firefighters didn't know the reservoir was empty until no water came out of the fire hydrants. And then the budget for the fire department was cut by $17 million. As someone who lived through a city government that had an inadequate response to virtually every crisis your city faced, what do you make of what Los Angeles is going through right now?
I think that it's a cautionary tale for the irresponsible nature of progressive policies. I think a missing stat that no one's saying enough is that over half of the fire department's calls in the last at least 3 years, if not more, were due to fires and homeless encampment. And so if you look at the sustained strain on resources, if you did not have those frequent homeless encampment fires, how much more resources and available firemen you would have had to tackle these issues, as well as water and storage. In addition to the defunding of fire and police, spending more on the homeless services to add insult to that than you spent on fire, only to have those homeless still contribute an ungodly amount of fire and strain, again, on your city resources. I think that's a big one that no one's talking about, that progressives are carefully avoiding in terms of a root cause for your lack of preparedness. But we have earthquakes looming in California. We have fires that are ever, growing threat because of our lack of preparedness and due to just changing conditions and building in places that maybe we shouldn't be building without making sure we're more careful about being able to fight fire or have better fire abatement. So I think, again, it's just people who are not equipped to lead. They were placed there. They were placed there by the public sector labor unions, by the Democratic Party, by, in my opinion, the CCP, but that's a whole nother interview if you want to have me back. But this is a nefarious agenda to manage the decline of our cities. And with that, leaves you vulnerable to natural disasters and not being able to stop things like once-in-a-generation high winds that create conditions to burn down all of Malibu and Altadena and half of Pasadena. Like, these things happen when you have irresponsible people. And it's also a lack of integrity. And I'll end with this. When you think of integrity, think of it more as a ship's hull. And if your ship's hull in the ocean lacks integrity and eventually splits, your boat's going to collapse and you're going to drown everyone. And you may not get that on each journey, but eventually it's going to split because it has no integrity. And so the lack of integrity in our leaders and their grifting nature, their self-serving nature, the fact that they're lie, cheat, steal, kill, do anything to keep power just for power's sake, leaves us in a very vulnerable position. I hope that voters take a longer look at this when they're selecting people and take voting as a life or death decision, because as many people are learning, it is.
Seneca Scott, founder of Neighbors Together Oakland. You can get him online at recallshangtao.org and follow him on X at Seneca Speaks 21. Seneca Scott, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me back, John. You guys be safe down there.
You too. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And if you'd like to go back and listen to one of our previous interviews with Seneca Scott when he was leading the recall effort against Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao, Randy, that's easy to do.
That's what a mayor do.
All you got to do is go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It is the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts. You can really relive all of the insane amazingness that was Sheng Tao's run as mayor.
And we still got our Oakland A's, baby.
No, you don't.
And speaking of the Bay Area, Randy, we're moving down the dial.
So we do a version of the Fix California Hour, weeknights at 11 on KSFO in the Bay Area, our sister station. How cool is this? We are moving that signal to a stronger signal. It went from 560 to AM 810. That is a signal that goes all the way through Northern California, Sacramento, and at night you can hear it down here crystal clear in Southern California. So set a preset, and if you happen to be driving around at 11 o'clock at night, sometimes it's also on at 6 o'clock, you can listen to the Fix California Hour.
Yesterday, we told you that there were attorneys who were making the allegation that Edison is responsible for starting one of the fires and lawsuits would be filed. Well, Randy, today we're learning the other side of it.
So ABC7 sat down with the CEO of Edison International. SoCal Edison is a subsidiary of that. And you got to remember, the fire investigators just barely got in there yesterday to figure out the origin of the fire. So we don't know that it's SoCal Edison, but SoCal Edison, much like PG&E, does have a track record of if a power line blows over, it can spark a fire. For more, here's ABC7 Eyewitness News.
And I sat down with Pedro Pizarro, president and CEO of Edison International, the parent company of Southern California Edison. We covered a wide range of topics, but I want to focus on concern and questions over the possibility that their power lines started the Eaton fire.
There were two sets of lines along Eaton Canyon. On the west side, there's a distribution, a lower voltage line. Distribution are the lines that typically go into homes. That line had covered conductor, but it had already been de-energized. Power had been turned off something like 2 hours before the reported start of the fire. We also have transmission lines on the east side of the canyon, and those were energized. But the criteria for when we shut off also depends on the type of line.
Pedro Pizarro.
So they didn't shut that one off.
Okay, I will say this, though. Just from the optics of how they're handling this, usually these companies clam up whenever there's an allegation of liability. The fact that the CEO is on TV and he's giving their side of the story, their explanation as to why they're not at fault for it, leads me to believe that, at least at this point, they believe they did not start that fire.
Pedro Pizarro is referring to the power lines in this photo taken during very early stages of the Eaton fire along the Eaton Canyon hiking trail. He explains why those lines were still energized.
And think about it this way. The smaller lines, distribution lines, they're lighter. If you have strong winds, they can get buffeted around more than a heavy, more robust transmission tower, transmission line. And so we typically have higher wind speeds that are the thresholds for transmission versus distribution.
I mean, there was some pretty wild wind speeds, but what he's trying to say here is the lines that weren't de-energized are so powerful that these winds weren't going to blow them down, because these are the ones on the big towers.
I see.
So that's why those transmission lines were not de-energized.
So when you see what these witnesses say, that they got captured video, they actually saw it with their own eyes and ran. And it did seem to be right under the base of a transmission tower.
Now, what if someone starts a fire right under the transmission tower, and then the transmission tower catches on fire, and that can lead to major destruction? Not necessarily the fault of SoCal Edison.
Well, that's possible, too. And we've received a number of emails from folks who live in this area who say that homeless encampments start fires in this general area all the time.
What is your reaction, and what would you tell them? Because these investigations go a long time.
Well, again, the first reaction is just my heart going out to everybody who's been impacted by this, including many of our friends in the area. We have looked at our equipment, what we've been able to monitor remotely. We monitor voltage, we monitor current. Typically, when there's a fire that starts because of an incident on an electric line, you will see a signature, you'll see an anomaly. Right? Voltage or current will change instantaneously when lines are arcing or sparking. We have not detected any of that.
Pizarro says they did not see an anomaly until about an hour after the reported start of the fire.
However, we've seen in your reporting the videos, we've seen the photos, so we know that there was fire there. We don't know what caused it.
It's got to be real tough to be a fire investigator when you have something this devastating in the Altadena area as well as the one in the Palisades area. Trying to figure out the origin point for both of these has got to be a hell of a job.
It's a difficult job, but they're generally pretty successful at figuring it out. One of my friends, my cruise ship friends of all places, is a former arson investigator for a large fire department in the state of Florida. And he told me that they pretty much can always figure out how these fires started, that they've got it down to a science, and they're very good at putting the pieces of the puzzle back together.
But we have not been able to get up close to those lines because firefighters have determined that it hasn't been safe to do that yet. And whatever we find, we'll be transparent with our public.
That statement was early this morning. This afternoon, progress as investigators finally get in. This is Eaton Canyon, and the tower in question is right there on the hillside. If you look closely, you'll see two investigators there right now looking for evidence. And then if you turn your attention to the bottom of the wash and you see all those vehicles at the bottom of the canyon, that's CAL FIRE and Cal Edison. Clearly, this is an important part of the investigation. In the meantime, we have to stay vigilant. Pizarro says 450,000 customers have been warned about possible power shutoffs for tonight's wind event, and they are monitoring weather conditions right now up to the moment in case they need to make a quick decision and shut off the power.
Yeah, they're going to be shutting a lot of power off tonight.
Oh, they are. And I know with these things, whenever someone's accused of a crime in particular, how they respond to it shouldn't necessarily determine whether or not you believe they did it or they didn't. Sometimes there are people who are criminals who did something very bad, who are willing to go on television, talk about it extensively, and defend themselves. Scott Peterson was like that. And sometimes you have people who are innocent, who feel totally overwhelmed by everything and just get shy, and they don't want to talk about it. In this particular case, I know how corporations react to allegations of liability. They say, do not say anything. Do not talk. Do not give them ammunition. Do not give them anything that they can use against the company in a lawsuit that will contradict any arguments we make in court at a later date. The fact that they're sending him out there to respond to the nitty-gritty details of the currents in those lines leads me to believe that that company, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that company, I believe, firmly is of the belief that they did not start that fire.
Well, and they got to get out as quickly as they can in front of the lawsuits that are being filed when we still don't know the official cause of the investigation, because just that headline can completely destroy any reputation that they have left. And they have caused fires before, so it's not that far of a stretch. But right now, we do not know how these fires started.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Garfield writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com on the subject of Barbara Lee running for mayor of Oakland. Let's not forget she wanted to raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour when she ran for U.S. Senate. She seems like another Karen Bass.
Which is not what Oakland needs right now.
Nope.